G'day guys, it is the coach. We are talking all things Skaven. I got such an awesome response to the last Skaven video that I did that we are back for more. The infestation has hit the mortal realms. My city of Sigmar is infested with the Arch-Warlock, Adam Trunzo, a man that I met 2 years ago at Adepticon and was blown away with his display board. And I've always known him as the Skaven guy. And I basically think you're like the Arch-Warlock of American Skaven, like you own the Master Clan. But for anyone who hasn't seen Adam, his display boards are off the charts. His hobby is off the charts. His Twitter handle is below. Go follow this person. But Adam, welcome. G'day. Skaven Skryre.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, Skaven Skryre. That's right. The best.
Yeah, they are the best. Well, depends on where they are. Like there was a time in Age of Sigmar 1 where I still had scars. I had scars from Skryre, where you'd have the double battalion. What was it? The double. I can't remember what the battalion was called, but it's the moment where I started calling Storm Fiends Storm Friends, because you didn't make friends with Storm Fiends. You'd tunnel up within 3 inches. You would just burninate literally everything in your path, and I cried.
Just making it rain mortal wounds, just raining all the time.
And people are super pumped. I've got Alex in the chat as well saying he's pumped for this one. But long story short, we're going to talk Skryre. Skryre is a part of Skaven. It is one of the builds. And to me, and I'd love to hear from you in a minute, like what drew you to Skaven and what got you so committed. But I think it's the most interesting one for me. You know, I started in Warhammer Fantasy Battles. You know, I loved Mordheim, which was all about, you know, the warp stone or the warp sparks. And I love just the crazy ingenuity of Skryre. I think it's that to me, like, I'm not interested in like the Eshin and the Molder, but a Skryre that kind of like that weird crack science that kind of like, this is awesome.
Yeah, well, the Mordheim band was Eshin, if I recall correctly.
Oh, so I'm talking just like the generic like warps. Yeah, that was just like your ninja rats.
Yeah,
I was more talking like the actual warp stone and all the stuff falling from the sky.
Oh yeah.
But what got you into Skaven? Like, why Skaven? Why Clan Skryre? And like, why have you played it for such a long time?
Yeah, so Skaven are just like, they're just the best. Like, they're not, you know, Tolkien-esque in an overt sort of way. They're kind of their own unique thing, and they're just like malicious, evil, like unapologetically, like backstabbing, manipulative. Like, they're just interesting, right? They're not in glittery, scaled cloaks doing the right thing. Like, they're just like this weirdly entropic, like massive group of weird rat men. Like, what's not to love?
It's crazy. Like when you start looking at some of those things, and I think is it the ogres or is it the storm friends that have like that crazy like weird crack baby at the back or something? You're just like, wait, what? Like if you don't look at it properly, you're like, what is that weird brain little rat thing going?
Yeah, like why not, right? Like, why not just do that? Like, that's something that Skaven can do. When you look at people's like Hell Pit Abominations or Doom Wheels, like you can just do whatever you want with them.
I'll pull this comment up from the chat, and Harry's asking, do you have a favorite conversion you've done with your Skaven? Because I imagine, especially Skryre has the opportunity to really convert and go crazy because it is weird science. Like it's truly some craziness, you know, the Frankenstein-esque, you know, using the warp sparks to create like some of the weirdest designs in Age of Sigmar. Have you made anything in particular that's kind of like sparked your interest?
Yeah, so like a Doom Wheel that I made where I like spaced everything out and actually had it like breaking through some bricks and like a door frame on the base. That was one that I like to do. One of the very first big conversions I made was just like a warp lightning cannon, which I just like literally opened like my garage like junk drawer. It took like springs and like light bulb pieces and just like shoved them all together and put them on a balsa wood frame, and it looks awesome. Like it's a cannon. You put like one little warp stone bit in front, and that's what it is. Like it's just coils and all sorts of weird science stuff.
Amazing. No, that's awesome. And again, like if this is not getting you pumped to do Skryre, I don't know what is. It's certainly, to me, such a cool piece. But they're not just cool to hobby with. They're obviously quite strong in the meta. Obviously, they're not like, 5-0 tournaments. That's the last thing we would want. But they hold their own on the competitive sense. And to me, either bringing some type of Skryre or going all in on Skryre is definitely a competitive build. And obviously the point of this show today is to go through 2 examples of the list that you're creating to bring that competitive edge to Skryre.
Yeah, and I think that Skryre is the damage engine that Skaven need to be competitive. If you don't have them around, you can do the stuff that other armies do, but not quite as well as they can. It's the one of the few things that we have that's just breaks the rules of the game in pretty significant ways.
Yeah, like to me, and we don't want to jump too far ahead, but you've got your generic clan rats and those types of troops that just like absolutely flood the board. They just flood the board. But where does the damage come from? Hello, kitty cat. Hello. But like you flood the board, but then so what? Like where does the damage come from? And to me, it's always been Skryre that's doing that. However, talking to Dan Brewer, friend of the channel, absolute legend in Skaven community, he was actually showing me some list tech that he's practicing this week with is it gutter runners? The guys, do they get like a pre-game move?
No, those are the night runners.
The night runners, yeah, the night runners. He was talking about playing around with some of that. Like, I'm like, oh, like not a lot of people are talking about that, but we're going to talk Skryre.
Yeah.
So I'm going to bring up the rules, and I'd love to get your insight to just how you're thinking about these rules when it comes to your list tech, and are they rules that you incorporate into your design? Are there things that are just like nice to have, or are there things that you're certainly building around? So I'll read out a couple of them really quickly. This is a generic stuff that hits everybody, and then we'll like double down with Skryre. So you've got your Lookout Sir, so it'll lead from the pack. So the Lookout Sir is going to apply in melee as well as with missile weapons, as long as, attacking the Skaven heroes that are not a monster. So how does that come into play for you?
So obviously it makes the little guys a little bit more survivable, but what it specifically does is when you look at the Plague Furnace and the Screaming Bell, they are not monsters. So they also get -1 to hit in combat. So it makes most of your characters a lot more survivable than they kind of look at. Some people will like ram a Terrorgeist right into you, and they're like, oh, that thing's off the board. It's like, actually, it's still there with a few wounds left. So that's something that's, they're just a little bit extra survivable.
Yeah, you don't want your Skaven heroes in combat like that. You don't have that Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon. You don't have a Maw Crusher. Oh, are you going to challenge me? Have you got like some? Oh,
I will challenge you. So, you do want your character in combat if it's not really doing anything. One of the key things with the Screaming Bell is if you have a Screaming Bell, let's say about 60 clan rats, which is pretty regularly. I mean, the clan rats take the objectives, so sometimes if they go, it's a win-win situation for you. If they go after the clan rats, they're battle shock immune. If they go after your Screaming Bell, it's probably still going to be there, and all the clan rats are still there too. So you can pick and choose what you put forward, and it's -1 to hit the big thing with a 4-up save and a 5-up after save. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, like yes. It's not like a battle mage where I literally don't want it in combat. It's like the last thing to do. But it's also not a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon running up the board. That was kind of my point. But yes, you can get it in combat. Just know they're squishy. Just know they're not going to do a lot of damage, but they can do enough chip damage to retain that objective to push back your opponent. Oh yeah. The -1 to hit in combat is juicy, as long as it's supporting a block of troops.
Yeah.
And Tom Dixie in the chat's mentioning that they're finding the Screaming Bell is quite resilient and is really good to tie up your enemy, which is really cool. It's got a lot of wounds. Probably one of the few things that has like that big bracket of wounds as well.
Yeah, and like heaven forbid you roll the -1 to hit on the bell as well. So now it's -2 to hit, and it's got a 4-up save, and there's just a lot going on there.
Yeah, you know, it's got enough wounds. It's going to tie your opponent down. It's not going to fight its way out, but it's going to tie your opponent up for a couple of rounds, which can be enough to retain an objective or deny your opponent scoring points. The second one you've got is Scurry Away. So in the combat phase, you can pick a friendly Skaven-type hero to fight with and say that's going to scurry away. So if you do so, the hero must make a normal move and retreat.
Yeah, so this one in particular, it kind of has two purposes. One is like a get out of jail free card when there's, keepers of secrets on every side of you, and you're just like, oh, I just have to survive for one more turn, hold this objective, that sort of thing. This is where it gets really difficult to do with like a Screaming Bell. So it doesn't apply. You can do it with a Screaming Bell, but it's much, much harder to get out of their pile-in and have space for its base when you also have to keep 10 rats in range of it while it makes this move as well. So very tricky to pull off for the bell, but for something like an assassin, something like for Skryre, your little warlocks, you charge forward. It's the only thing that you're probably going to be charging in a turn, and then you just kind of do a pump fake and just go right around them and grab that objective. So it's super helpful. However, you do feel compelled to mention it immediately when you're charging. It's like, I'm going to do this thing, because it's one of the biggest gotchas in the game where it's like, all right, I'm going to hold off on attacking that. And you just go, whoop. And they're like, oh, because it's so rarely talked about.
So do you tell you're at a tournament, obviously when we're at a local games club, just having matches, we'll talk each other, we'll have fun, but will you tell people at a tournament that you can do this at the start of the game, before combat, bit of both?
Yeah, both. It is one of those where it's like, Skaven have enough gotchas that that are going to occur that you just feel like you have to say it both times.
Yeah, and it also could be good like a psych. You're like, look, I can do it. Be like, oh, I better go kill that hero. It's like, cool, well, I'll just do something else. Like knowing that, because if you know a hero is potentially going to do that and then wrap and steal an objective, or start positioning, alternatively, you might bait your opponent to go kill that hero, but it was always a dummy hero. But at the same time, if they ignore it, then you can do your plan. So I guess it's,
Yeah, it also means that they can't leave a gaping gap in their lines for you to do that with. And so even just threatening it and never carrying through with it actually affects the way that they deploy and move throughout the game, which is one of the biggest things that people win with.
You've also got two other rules. One being the and by the way, people are saying it's fun to slingshot Thankwall through combat, like moving it around.
Oh, yeah.
So good old Thankwall. You've got your overwhelming mass, so you had +1 to hit for attacks by melee weapons by Skaven Tide if they have 20 or more models. Now, Skryre to me is not the horde part. It's the clan rats. I don't remember any Skryre units being above 20.
Correct. Yep, that's correct. So the max you can have is 20 in the acolytes. So it's doesn't have a lot of space to run in the Skryre list.
But you can have 20 acolytes?
Yes, 20 acolytes.
Okay, so if I've got 20 acolytes and they haven't taken damage, and they've only got short range, those acolytes, so you have to be really lucky to not get one dead.
Well, it is only in combat, only in melee.
Of course, yes. And I was literally about to reread the rules. I was literally about to reread it, and I'm like, nope, it's melee. It's just melee. So
unless you're kind of galaxy braining some sort of melee acolyte list, I don't think it's going to come into play.
Yeah, and if obviously if the rules were shooting, it'd be a different story, but it's going to help you, and it might encourage you to take a unit of clan rats, or should you want to take advantage of that, or maybe the dudes with the halberds. But this is the Skryre show.
Yeah, it doesn't really, clan rats, it's nice, but it doesn't do anything. But it's really only those elite infantry, and even then, the amount of anti-horde stuff out there these days makes it like, maybe I do, maybe I don't.
Yeah, and there's been times where, I've played an opponent and they get like a buff at 20 and they've only got 20 models. You just do like one mortal wound, you do an arcane bolt, you do some type of spell, like, cool,
Yep.
you've lost your rules. So, but again, it's melee only. Your acolytes are not getting the advantage of that, and everything else is not tapping into that. The last rule that you get generically before we get into Skryre, and I want to unpick your thinking around Skryre, because I think it's an interesting build, and one that's not guaranteed. So you always got have at least 2 plans when it comes to your Warpstone Sparks. But the last one you've got is the strength in numbers, so adding 2 to the bravery characteristic instead of 1 when it comes to battle shock. So again, the Skryre component of your Skaven is not large units. So I guess even a +1 is an additional 1, so 2 for every 10 is great.
Yeah. So if you have your acolytes and, for whatever reason they didn't get wiped out horrifically, maybe next run one will survive.
So yeah, it's nice, but again, you're not building around it with the Esh as the Skryre side. But again, you might take a Clan Rats and have a block to screen your acolytes and Uzales, for example. So you do get your additional ways of the clan. So if you do bring in your master clan, your Molder, your Verminus, your Eshin, you're also getting an additional bunch of things. By going by Skryre, Adam, correct me if I'm wrong. If I go in all in on Skryre, it doesn't mean that I lose this stuff. It doesn't mean that if I happen to have a master clan, I can still use it. It's just that we're not building around it.
Correct. You can only have, if you're going pure Skryre, the only other clan thing you can have is a master clan, 1 model who is your general. So you do get this skilled manipulator's trait of 5+ receiving extra command points. So it can come into play in what's considered a pure Skryre list.
Yeah. And once you start going into other clans, it becomes a bit of a mixed force. You start to lose some of those effects. But the effects that I really want to talk about is the Warpstone Sparks, because it's a fascinating one that a lot of people don't understand. Especially I see a lot of questions when it comes to opponents going, what is this? How do you just apply this? When do I apply it? And I also want to understand your logic on when and what are those right units and right times to apply your Warpstone Spark. So by going Skryre, you do get the Warpstone Spark. That is your big special thing. And if your unit includes any Clan Skryre heroes at the start of the battle, before your army is set up, you roll a d3 and add 3. So we're looking at minimum 4, maximum 6. Is there any way to increase that number with any pluses at all?
Yes. There's one that I think allows you to, you're testing me here, one that I think you get a free spark to use for a particular hero. Then I think there's another one that increases the number you get by 1 or 2.
Okay, so if you want to double down, there might be some, and I'll have a look at the book just to find those little nuggets.
Mm-hmm.
But there might be ways. But look, at minimum, you're looking at 4 Warpstone Sparks, approximately 6 at maximum. There might be a couple of ways to get some additionals. But basically, you got your Warpstone Sparks. You get them at the start of the battle before we get into all the goodness. You can't use more than 1 Warpstone Spark in the same phase. So that doesn't mean that I can't use. So I can only use it 1 in shooting, 1 in magic, 1 in combat, only
Right.
1. So there might be, yeah.
And the interesting thing with this too is it's at the start of the battle before their army is set up. And I think that if you really into Skryre, sometimes the difference between rolling a 4 and rolling a 6 might actually adjust your game plan and how you approach deployment and depth and stuff like that. So it's just something to be aware of.
What you can use your Warpstone Sparks with is a couple of different things. So in your hero phase, you can pick a Clan Skryre wizard, and it can re-roll the casting, dispelling, unbinding for that wizard until the end of the phase. And then at the end of the phase, you roll a dice. On a roll of a 1, the wizard suffers D3 mortal wounds. How do you rate that one?
So this one, you'll see in some of my lists later, but it is particularly excellent if you have an endless spell and more warp power that you want to get off. So with the ability to reroll hits and wounds for a unit, and any sort of endless spell that you might want to do. So on an Arch-Warlock, they're able to cast 2 spells, and that's what you would use this for, typically to get the most out of it, because you get it for all of your rerolls or all of your casting attempts.
Just to call out as well, Gulliman Berger mentioning that I did find it as well. You get +2 Warpstone Sparks if you take the Masterful Scavenger inspiration for your Skryre hero. So you can get an extra +2 there. And big shout out to Poet as well. Thank you for the donation. That's much appreciated, my friend. Is there a lot of double casters in your list?
There are a lot of double casters in Skaven in general. Almost everyone is. It's the rare exception that is, and I think it's only the Warlock Engineer and Bombardier who aren't. So that's kind of unique. But within Skryre itself, or within my lists, you have the Greyseer, who's a double caster but doesn't get to benefit from this, and then the Arch-Warlock, which is just a great unit in general, and it's a double caster.
I assume you're going to tell me that the best use of your spark is going to be here, this next one, which is in your shooting phase. You pick one friendly Clan Skryre hero, then you pick up to three. Not one, three. You get to pick up 3 units wholly within 13 of that hero. So that's challenging. That's a tough. That's not a big radius. 13 is all right, but it's not huge. You get to add 1 to the damage characteristic of missile weapons until the end of the phase, and similar deal at the end of the phase. Roll a dice. On a roll of a 1, the hero takes D3. So +1 damage is brutal, but 13 inches. Or am I making things up? Like, is that? Am I making stuff up that it's not that bad?
So Skaven are tough. I mean, they are an army that is not fast, and they don't like to be separated from each other. They tend to like deploy in a ball and stay in a ball for at least the really important bits. The clan rats, they can spread out a little bit wider, but yeah, most of your things want to be tucked in together and move around like that.
Whenever I play a Skaven Skryre opponent, it's always like having a hero, like let's say Jezzails, right? Having the hero in the center, and then like a line of Jezzails on one side, a line of Jezzails on the other side, even a third line of Jezzails if you want, and just having like that block. So you've got your 13, and the deployment for them is so important to make sure that they don't, because your Jezzails have the threat range long enough that you don't have to worry too much about moving to get into range. And just positioning this is key.
Yeah, and there's a few other things that help with that. If you do take a Greyseer general with a Skryre armor, you have access to Skitter Leap, so you can get that guy where you need him to be exactly. And you also have access to the Gnawholes, which we'll talk about in a little bit, where you can get people where they need to go.
We will absolutely talk about Gnawholes. I want your thoughts on Gnawholes and how you're using them. Are you using them aggressively, defensively? We'll find out in a minute. But go on, sorry.
No, I was going to say the other thing with this shooting phase one is as you're doing your list building, try to come up with, maximize it. So make sure you have a full 3 big, powerful shooting units available. If you only have 2 in your list, you maybe want to think about how you can spread it out to really maximize that. And one of the easiest ways to do is if you only have 2, upgrade a Warlock Engineer to a Bombardier, and he gets it on his little bomb too. So that's just one other thing to think about.
Smart. I was going to ask you which units are you building around, but I'm like, oh wait, this is a list talking show. He's probably got a list where he's going to talk about that. All right, cool. So we'll get to that soon. But yes, to me, this is the big piece on Skryre. It's always about the shooting, the sheer damage that comes out of acolytes, the sniping goodness of your Jezzails, and everything else that can shoot. That to me is the big one. Then the last one, I'm a bit torn on this one, is that in the combat phase, you pick one friendly Skryre hero. It can reroll hit rolls for that hero until the next phase, until the end of the phase. Again, on a roll of a 1, that hero takes D3 mortals. That one seems underwhelming, but am I right?
You're correct. I mean, the only time I've ever used it was like Adepticon top tables, like this scrappy match. My Arch-Warlock finally made it in with that last Witch Elf on that objective, and I'm gonna give it a swing, and I roll a 1 and re-roll it, and I roll another 1, and my Arch-Warlock blows up. And it's just like, okay. It
seems like a desperation play. It seems like I will use it in the moment if I really need it, but I'm not building a strategy around re-rolling my hit rolls in combat for a hero. Like the shooting and the magic is just far more potent.
Right, a hero that has one attack, or essentially 2 attacks if you're the Arch-Warlock.
I think for me, the wizard part as well that becomes really powerful is it's not just casting, but it's the dispelling and the unbinding attempts as well. So if you want to get rid of that endless spell, if you really want to cast that endless spell, if you really want to make your opponent, they've got Soul Scream Bridge, they've got that really important spell to cast, giving yourself an extra chance to unbind it or to dispel becomes, it can be the difference where you get a spell off or you don't get off. So
while the Arch-Warlock does get double cast, it only gets a single unbind. So it's got a lot less utility in that field. But yes, you're absolutely right. If you have to stop something, you can save it.
Compared to re-rolling hit rolls of a hero, I think was
right.
Like compared to that, I'm like, I'd rather just like try to keep a spark for the hero phase. So, anything else you'd mention about the Warpstone Sparks before I get your insights on the Gnawhole?
Warpstone Sparks essentially get the clock ticking on you right away from the beginning of the game. They say you need to have your enemy wiped out within the first 3 turns of the game, especially if you only rolled that 4 Warpstone Sparks. The clock is ticking on you. You really have to hit them hard and early because they're going to run out turns 4 and 5, and your damage goes down precipitously from there.
And I know as an opponent, whenever I play a Skryre list, it's all about taking those small those small wounded heroes, the Bombardier, all of those different little heroes that allow you to do what you want to do. So I think that kind of doubles in on the clock is ticking. You don't have a lot of wounds on those heroes. They're not that resilient, especially if there's magic, right? If I can get my Hurricanum, I can get, some Arcane Bolt style, long range mortal wound damage. All of a sudden I can start taking those away, denying the Lookout Sir rule, and then I can disarm the Bombardiers. I disarm the Jezzails. I disarm your dude. So,
well, I think that plays really well into what we're going to talk about now with Gnawholes. So
it's like a perfect segue.
Yeah.
So your Gnawholes are your Allegiance terrain guys. You get to set up 3 of them. The rules are they have to be within 6 inches of the table edge, more than so within 6 inches of a table edge. Was that right? And
I think it's within 9 inches. I think it has to be. Must hold be within 6 inches of the Gnawhole. But I think the deployment is like it has to be within 8 or 9 inches of the edge of the board.
So more importantly, talk to me about how you use the Gnawholes. Are you using them offensively? So you want to because you can put them anywhere around the board, right? You can put 2 in my side of the board, or you can put 2 in your side of the board. Are you thinking about them defensively, where you have a Gnawhole to get yourself a +1 to cast? Are you thinking about creating the deadly effect and trying to annoy me as your opponent? Are you thinking about them for tunneling and trying to put them around the board so you can have your dudes pop up and pew pew?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I mean, the long answer is that it depends, right, on the scenario, on whatever else is happening. You always want to have one kind of anchor your whole deployment. You typically want to have generally 2 in your own deployment zone is what I like to have, because they go down before deployment. And if you only have 1 in your deployment zone, the enemy knows exactly where you're going to at least start. And they can kind of build around that. But if you have 2, you can kind of keep them guessing where your center of power is. And if you have 2 on your side and you screen each of them a little bit, you can actually, throughout the game, between Skitterleap and the Gnawholes, shift pretty significantly your power base from one side of the board to the other. So you can really, throw a hard right hook, and then next turn actually throw a strong left hook and move around some that way.
I'm trying to find where you set them up. I'm being told that it's 8 inches. For some reason, I can't find it. Like,
it's in the scenery deployment rules somewhere else. Either in the generic scenery deployment rules, whatever.
Cool.
It is.
All right. Well, I think we think it's 8 inches. Just don't quote me on that internet. So how are you thinking about it? So obviously, scenario comes into play. Are you primarily thinking about putting your Giselles or your Acolytes or your Storm Fiends? Are you thinking about popping them out and powering or charging? Are you thinking about it more just psychologically, like I can, but I won't, but you don't know that?
It's psychologically. The whole thing with Skaven is we're not fast in any sort of traditional sense, but we do have a lot of very strong power projection, and you're never really sure what we're going to do. And we could do stuff, and it could be catastrophic for us, but there's always that chance in the back of your head that you're going to get wiped off the map by some sort of wacky Skaven tactic. And so people are already on edge, and you just want to just really shove the knife in and twist it psychologically when you start looking at all the different kind of okay teleportation that we have.
Yeah, it reminds me of my gits. My colossal squeak can charge 46. That could be very far, but the likelihood of it doing it actually is no, it's not.
Right, and I think that you're used to that sort of chaos or that sort of randomness, but you up against that really tight, Cities of Sigmar, synergies everywhere sort of player that really doesn't like randomness, and they start sweating when they see that. It's like, you don't know, I don't know, nobody knows. It's like, yeah, but I'm used to that.
Yeah, it's the fun part of playing an army like Destruction and like this. I think it's you just don't know, and I think as an opponent, I plan for the worst and I hope for the best. I never plan for the best because the best never happens.
Yeah.
It's so rare. It's so rare.
Right. But they don't know that.
Oh no, I never tell them that. They're like, oh yeah, of course I'm gonna hit 46 of I'm gonna roll nothing but sixes.
Yeah, it's like I could. So the Gnawholes play into that some. Obviously, you always want to have one for that casting roll, at least for turn one. The other thing that the Gnawhole does is, one, it's very difficult to set up on, but what I like to do is use that as an anchoring point for a Soul Scream bridge, which factors pretty heavily into my lists, and everything fits around a Gnawhole, and it fits around a Soul Scream bridge. They both happen at the beginning of the movement phase, so you can do one and then do the other with the same unit. So it just provides a lot of tactical flexibility, where you can actually get more through a Soul Scream bridge than started around it, because you pull it in from another Gnawhole to your Gnawhole and then over the bridge.
And by the way, we found the rule. So each Gnawhole must be set within 8 inches of the edge of the battlefield, more than 3 inches from an enemy unit or objectives, and more than 1 from territory. So terrain features, other terrain features. So that's where we got to
perfect. Additionally, I almost never put them in my opponent's deployment zone, unless it's a really deep deployment zone and they wouldn't normally sit on it. Because if they sit on the Gnawholes that are out in no man's land, you've kind of won, because those Canare are over there, or not messing with your own line. So if they sit on it with anything, you've kind of won. There's some interplay you can do with that, with some MSU stuff to kind of fight them off of them, but for the most part, if they sit on them, then they're playing with 200 less points than you.
Yeah, and as always, as the opponent, I'll play the devil's advocate here. There's always the threat, especially there's a lot of armies that are built around a castle mentality. They've got a really strong unit at the front, and behind it is a juicy center of, minor heroes, a support wagon, a bunch of wizards, just some things that you don't want to get into combat. And as my force advances up the board, so does the gap between the Gnawhole and the opponent's force. So this question starts to come up to go, do I not push my units as far up the board because I don't want you to teleport behind my line and either claim an objective or get into that juicy center of my wizards, support heroes, buff pieces? Or do I leave a unit behind? And some armies don't take cheap bodies, or nor do they have access to cheap bodies. So in my Sons of Behemoth army, for example, the cheapest thing I can leave there is a 200-point minor Gargant.
Right.
That's an expensive cost. I don't have a lot of units. So if you're forcing me to sit on that objective or sit on that Gnawhole, that's one less thing in combat. If I move it forward, you're like, cool, I'm now going to teleport and I'm going to take around the board, all around the board. I can start really kind of manipulating you and pulling you out of combat and really picking apart the things that are making your army just great. So it's almost like the psychological piece of the Gnawhole is just as powerful as what it can actually do.
Yeah, and I also want to emphasize that the Soul Screen Bridge works really well with this because, if you don't have it, then by the time the Skaven move into the midfield, you're like, okay, they don't even have anything around a Gnawhole because you have to have a hero and a unit there, or or you're just moving the hero through. So by the middle of the game, usually it's like, well, they don't have anything to send through that. But with the Soul Screen Bridge, you can shove stuff back there and then shove it straight through. So there's always that risk.
The other annoying part as well, or it's annoying / fun, is when you deploy things on the Gnawhole. So, so your opponent's like, oh, he's really going to teleport something into my side, but it's like the long range of attack of a Jezzail, or like it was never going to be a part of the plan, but it was just like annoying your opponent.
That's the other thing you can do with the Gnawhole is set both of them up, within about 12 inches of each other, and you backboard your Jezzails, and then you send them through one Gnawhole forward through the other Gnawhole that's, pretty close by. So they get a free movement that's not a move, so they still get their Jezzail shots, but they're still within the protected envelope of your meat shield.
I dig it. No, I love it. And there's so much goodness that comes from those Gnawholes. Let's get into lists. You've got 2 lists for me. The first one is a pure Skryre list, and then the second one is bringing in a little bit from the other part of the book. But this is kind of your example of a pure Skryre list. And again, caveat, guys, this is just an example. This is not the silver bullet. It's going to make you win the next GT. But how we put the theory into practice, and you do you. If you like certain units, you bring them in. But we're just kind of putting the theory into practice. So I'll read out the list, and then you can start talking to me about why you chose what you chose. So the first thing you've got there is your Arch-Warlock, which is the general, and you've got Verminous Valor, as well as the artifact Vigor Dust Injector, and the spell more War Power. And as we go through, I also notice an engineer, and an engineer has more War Power. So you have 3 versions of more War Power. I wonder if you've built in some redundancy here. I wonder if this is an important spell for you. And we'll find out why. Like I love and hate more War Power. Like,
well, yeah.
I love and hate it at the same time. You've also got 6 Storm Friends with 2 of each. So you got 2 of the Wind Launchers, 2 of the Rattling Guns, 2 of the Doom Flayer Gauntlets. Interesting. You've got 5 Acolytes, 5 Acolytes, 5 Acolytes, 5 Acolytes, 5 Acolytes, 5 Acolytes. So 6. I would have expected a block of 20. So I'm curious to find out why you've got so much smallness as opposed to a big block, but again, we'll get to that. You've also got yourself the Warp Lock Jezzails. You've got 2 Warp Lightning Cannons and the Soul Screen Bridge coming in at a grand total of 2,000 points at 110 wounds. This is not the list I would have expected from you. Everyone's been talking about a big block of 20 Acolytes. I would have expected some Jezzails. Talk to me, bring this home for me. Like, when we start at the top, like why did you build this list and how's it work?
Yeah, so the biggest notable decision you have to make for Skryre is whether or not you go with a battalion or not. And I just chose not to so that I could have some more stuff on the board. And the general idea with this is 20 Acolytes are fine, but if you have stuff that's already pretty good at short to medium range, so those cannons, the Storm Fiends, and the Jezzails, what else is going to be there for those little guys to shoot at because you've destroyed it all? In this, you're trying to focus on some of that very strong first turn potential damage that your opponent doesn't know how much you can do, but you know that you can do a ton or not so much. And I think the key thing that makes all this work, again, is that Soul Screen Bridge. You can fit 6 Storm Fiends, 2 Warp Lightning Cannons, and even 6 Jezzails through if you're able to situate everything pretty well. And that in the absolute middle of the board with all of their buffs on, ready to go, turn 1, I would think twice about whether or not I gave away turn 1 to this list.
Yeah, whenever you see a Soul Screen Bridge, you and I made the mistake at this at a tournament 18 months ago. I remember playing this. It was more of a mixed clan Skaven force, but they threw up I think it was the Screaming Bell, and maybe it was 40 Plague Monks, and it might have been a couple of other things. I was surprised how much you could fit into this. I didn't think you could fit as many units into that radius, but then throwing that up and then, using some of the movement shenanigans you've got, that turn one charge, I'm like, oh, that's I didn't expect that. So, and, I probably, in hindsight, yes, I probably would have taken the first turn. So that one caught me out.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you screen them with 5 acolytes, to either side, and then everybody just fits inside of the Soul Screen Bridge in the dead center of the table and dares you to move it and wipes out whatever you had close to it. And so that's the case where you have the Soul Screen Bridge. So the acolytes, they can't shoot through the bridge like that. So they kind of get left behind if you had a big 20 block that you're depending on.
And that's probably one of the challenges that you've got with the acolytes, is the acolytes have very short range. Like it's not that, and that's where the Jezzails come in if they're the more of the long range attack. So you're compensating, or you're compensating by using the breach to move up the board and then to be in range for shooting.
Yeah, because when you look at Skryre, it's like, okay, am I going to take these 20 blocks of acolytes and then try to bog down my enemy? But really, the pure heart of Skryre is just to punch them in the face as early and as heavily as you possibly can, and hope that there's just nothing left to hurt your precious machines. And
I dig it.
That's what this kind of goes to do.
No, I dig it. So talk about the Arch-Warlock. So you've got Arch-Warlock, it's got the Verminous Valor, it's Vigor Dust, Injector, and the more War Power. What does the Arch-Warlock bring into the table that, like a Bombardier or some other support hero, like why not 3 Engineers? You've obviously got 2, why not 3? Like, what's that Arch-Warlock bring into the table?
The key thing that he's bringing to the table is the double cast with the Warpstone Sparks turn 1. So he's going to be sitting on a Gnawhole to get reroll +1 to cast Soul Screen Bridge and more Warp Power. He's going to be doing that because you have the Soul Screen Bridge. He's going to be doing that outside of Unbind range. He's going to be, he can be on your back board edge, and then within turn 1, between going through the Soul Screen Bridge, and on the other side of that, he can move, a long ways to get to where he needs to go. So you can do that unless you've got, Croak or a Slan. It's probably not going to be able to be unbound. You're probably not going to be within range. Kind of what you're talking about with the Hurricanum. You can backboard most of the stuff in a Skryre list, and the Soul Screen Bridge can shove it all forward.
So you probably have to watch out for things like Knight Incantors as well, which have like the auto unbind. So, but other than that, majority of people would have a tough time stopping that.
Yeah, if you're playing against a 4-up save army like the Stormcast Eternals, like Skryre just like lick their lips at all the mortal wounds they're going to do.
So you're using the Arch-Warlock in combination with the Gnawhole to apply the Warpstone Spark, get the reroll to the cast, get the +1 from being within range of the Gnawhole, to then bring up the Soul Screen Bridge. You're then bringing 4 units of 5 acolytes and the Storm Friends.
So you might bring, whatever number of acolytes makes sense. You probably just want to have, enough to have a light screening element, bubbled out to the maximum extent of the Soul Screen Bridge. So you send them through first, and then everything else goes inside of that cage that you build for yourself. With the Storm Fiends up front with rattling guns, so that they can shoot at whatever is within their range. Everything else can kind of be anywhere within that basket, because it all has roughly 24 plus inch range. And can some of it can see over intervening terrain, stuff like that. So yeah, you cast both of those things. You cast the more Warp Power on the Storm Fiends. You shove it all through the Soul Screen Bridge and hit all of the tender parts.
I'm just rereading the Arch-Warlock spell, the Warp Lightning Storm. That's not too bad. That's actually not bad, dude. Casting value of 7, D3 enemy units within 13 of the caster suffer D3 mortal wounds. So maybe in the subsequent turns after you've Soul Screen Bridge, should you get the double turn, should you just be in that center of the board, that's a nice way to do some chip damage and kind of might take out some support heroes, or at least degrade some behemoths. That's it's not a bad little spell.
Yeah, with the amount of power projection, the odds of 3 units getting within range of you are pretty low. But if and when they do, like you have that extra power to push them out because they're probably not going to be at full strength.
Yeah. If is the question, but
The other thing not to be underestimated about the Arch-Warlock is that 2-up, 8-inch D3 mortal wounds shooting attack that it has once per game. That thing has finished off, like you shoot everything else, and then it just walks up and taps the Terrorgeist, and it just blows apart in a thick, gory spray, and it's just the best.
that's the Warfire Gauntlet. So in your shooting phase, pick one within 8. Again, very short range, so it's a good... Should you find you want to kill whatever's, or you want to seriously wound whatever's coming, because if they're within 8, they're coming for you.
Yeah, and so between the Arch-Warlock and the Warlock Engineers, you see a lot of short range. The short range mortal wounds intensify as you get closer. So if you charge in me turn 1 with something, chances are on my turn magic phase, you're probably going to be already hurting pretty badly, and then I'm going to shoot you a lot.
As Tom Dixon said in the chat as well, he can become a real nuisance with Skitter Leap in the backfield if you're not careful. And I think that's the thing, right? One little hero, a small little bunch of troops. Dan Brewer has taught me anything in our games over the many years that we have played together. You can't underestimate anything in Skaven. Even a little hero, a small block of troops are enough with the right rules, to be able to retreat onto an objective and steal it, to be able to go into your backfield and, you can only screen so much and we'll start sniping out or start degrading some of those key pieces. So I dig it. I absolutely dig that. And partially also probably why I'm so annoyed, because my force is so often reliant on those 5 wound heroes that you just like, pew, I'm like, oh.
And the odds are with this Skryre list is that you're just taking a sledgehammer to whatever plan your opponent has. So there's plenty of cracks in there to slip a sneaky little rat into. And so, like, the options exist.
The amount of times Dan Brewer has retreated onto an objective with, like, 2 clan rats. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
but like, that's where, like, you don't want to split your attacks. You don't want to underestimate it. Again, the retreating abilities, like, people forget about retreating, and for some reason, most people think they should just fight through combat. Like, Skaven reward you from retreating, and usually it's that moment after playing a Skaven, you play like, oh, yeah, maybe I should retreat as well, because I was never going to win that fight in combat, yet I could actually wrap around and get into a juicier target, again, a little hero, a little wizard. Or there's an exposed objective that I can now get 2 or 3 models on and claim it because you tagged and go.
And I think that's one of the key things too, is when you look at the Soul Screen Bridge as well, you can disengage your entire army. A lot of people, they have that tactic of, I'm going to cage you in and everything's going to be within 3 inches and ha ha ha. But you Soul Screen Bridge your guys who are within 3 inches back so that they're just within 9 inches. They can shoot at anything now. And my clan rats are just going to, Marathi charge right into me, but they're just going to flow around her, ignore her, and like hit whatever's behind her. And she's just going to be kind of looking around or wondering where they're going. So
I'm going to ask you a silly question that I know the answer for, but I know some people might be thinking about it, is, does this list work, or does that strategy work with the boatman? So Lockie the boatman, or is there something specific about Lockie that is stopping you compared to the bridge?
Yeah, Launchin, he takes 1 model from the unit, and the main unit that you're trying to truck around here is the Storm Fiends. So you don't want to lose one of the big guys, and it only takes 1 unit, whereas the bridge we all assumed was going to be brought down some way, but you can shove everything through that you need to. And so we're looking at small units, maximum shooting power projection that need to be within range of each other. That's Soul Screen Bridge, and you have Gnawhole and Skitter Leap to supplement that. Like it just all works. That's the engine that makes it work.
Yeah, so Soul Screen Bridges allow you to take your support heroes and a bunch of troops. So Cities of Sigmar is a perfect example. They'll bring, a bunch of Iron Drakes along with the Warden King and the Rune Master, and they'll take a big block of support with it, while the Boatman will only throw a unit. So it could be really good for like a block of Plague Monks that you just want to throw at your opponent's face. Mm-hmm. But if you need the support heroes, and it sounds like this kind of list does, then then you don't want to be taking the boat, even though it's cheaper, because you're not getting the full effects. You really need something that can handle its own, which is where Plague Monks come in. Your Skryre Acolytes, your Jezzails, maybe your Storm Fiends, but then the sacrifice, as you said, you've got to sacrifice one model. And when you're sacrificing 6 or 7 wounds, that's a tax that's not worth it in comparison to just using a Gnawhole.
Right. And I'm not sure when launching works, but if it's not at the beginning of the movement phase, then it doesn't synergize well with the Gnawholes too to move around. The other thing with this list is, yes, you teleport up to the middle of the board and blow everything away, but what happens then? Your opponent's army hopefully is in tatters, but it's still kind of there. How do you get your, scrawny rat butt all the way over 30 inches away to their objective? And that's where, again, the Soul Screen Bridge comes into play. Is they've only got a few models left, and they're like, well, I can still hold this, but you're like, oh, but I can recast this and get much further. And they're like, okay, never mind. Like, we'll call it there.
And in addition, you've got your Gnawholes to get some teleporting, so move some stuff up the board. And there's obviously the ability with your Storm Friends to get the tunneling version as well. So if you're looking for even more movement, there's some really good movement shenanigans that you can tap into with your Skaven. But before we get into the Storm Friends, I want to talk about the Warlock Engineers. So you've got 2 of them. We talked about why is more war power? We haven't talked about it yet. Despite it being on your list 3 times, why is this so important, and why is it so good that you've taken it 3 times as opposed to having a different spell?
Yeah, I mean, it's the key spell that makes everything work in the army. It's reroll hits and reroll wounds for a unit, and then that unit takes D3 mortal wounds next turn. It's just that important. The Arch-Warlock, he's tough. We didn't mention it, but he's got a 3-up save, and if he's sitting on a Gnawhole, that's a 2-up. And he's got Verminous Valor, which means he gets a 4-up shrug a wound onto somebody else. So he's actually got a lot of tough wounds in there. But if he goes down, the Warlock Engineers are there, and you have 2 Warlock Engineers to power up both of the Warp Lightning Cannons, because you can only do 1-to-1 for those. So they're little buff pieces for that, as well as just being a redundancy system.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just trying to look for the spell exactly, so I can read it out for anyone. Because Skitterleap is really good. I really, really, really like Skitterleap. Other spells, things like Death Frenzy, but probably this list isn't going to benefit that. Really work when you're looking at Skryre. As opposed to the Master Clan, you've got 3 different spells. You've got more Warp Power, Warp Lightning Shields, and Chain Warp Lightning. And when you start looking at these spells, you can clearly see why more Warp Power is just so superior. So it's casting value of 7. Obviously, you can get a +1 if we're next to our Gnawhole. We pick 1 friendly Clan Skryre unit within 12 inches of the caster and visible. You can reroll hit and wound rolls for that unit until the next hero phase. However, at the end of your next hero phase, the unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. So you just want to absolutely punch your opponent in the gonads as hard as possible. Yes, you're going to take D3 mortal wounds, but you have just hopefully obliterated a key piece.
Yeah, and this is going on the Storm Fiends until there's none of them left. And if there's none of them left, then it goes on the Jezzails, and if there's none of them left, then it goes on an Acolyte unit.
And if you had a big block of Acolytes, the 20 that we've spoken about in the past, that would be a great unit, but because you're only picking 1 unit within 12, that's probably where the Storm Fiends probably take advantage of this better. But again, season to taste, guys. If you're taking big blocks of Jezzails, you're taking the block of Acolytes as opposed to kind of cutting them up like Adam has. I think either way, whatever you choose, you want a big block to take advantage of the reroll hit and wounds, and then with the Warpstone Spark adding +1 damage as well.
And the rerolls are in combat as well as shooting. So when you Storm Fiends charge in, they're also hitting you pretty hard.
I want to call out a comment that Donald's mentioned, and it's a really good one. We were talking about this offline before we started, and Donald was mentioning that, Acolytes aren't cheap models, and he's 100% correct. When you buy an Acolyte from Games Workshop, it is a metal model, one of the few metal models still in the range, and you're buying them in blister packs of 1. So I think they're, obviously add your own country, but they're probably like a unit of Acolytes. If you buy the legitimate ones, are probably the most expensive unit in the game because it costs you so much to buy blocks of one for like, in Australia, it's probably like $20. So, a unit would be probably like $200, probably more. I think I'd love to hear your thoughts around this, but I think for me in the current age, I've seen some really cool conversions using Blood Bowl kits. I've seen some people using some of the older models that are no longer available from the Island of Blood set. And I've also seen people really taking advantage of 3D printing and resin 3D printing. So I'm not an advocate of 3D printing Games Workshop models. I'm traditionally, like, it's Games Workshop's IP. I want to support them so they keep investing in the product. But I find it hard to justify buying the legitimate Skryre Acolyte models at the price point they're currently at.
Yeah, I just used old Island of Blood, actual just clan rats or models without a shield, and I just rolled a little ball of green stuff, gave them a ghoul hand to hold on to it, and like, that's it. Like, it doesn't have to be anything too fancy. If you wanted to go beyond that, you get some of the Skitarii bits from 40K, or use their models. Anything, I'd say it's well represented by anything that has kind of a short range shooting attack. So you can use the bombards from, the dwarven iron drakes, stuff like that.
Yeah. I would definitely highlight, look, if you are rolling in money like Scrooge McDuck and you've got a big pile of cash, you're swimming along in your cash, all for it. But if you're looking at this going, oh, this is useless, I can't afford, Skryre Acolytes, I would highly recommend going out and converting, kit bashing. I'm already seeing in the chat so many people are sharing their ideas on how they're converting up, because as a tournament organizer, I run a large tournament in Australia. I'm okay with conversions as long as it represents the model. And if you are going to use clan rats as your base, just show me how different it is between a clan rat and an acolyte. And I think it's where Blood Bowl kind of works really well, because at least they don't look like anything else in your range. I can't be confused between a block of acolytes and a block of clan rats.
Yeah. The other deciding factor is that they're on 32 mils instead of 25s, which is an easy way to distinguish them, and is always also kind of sad because you'd like to shove a bunch of them into one space to get the most out of their shooting attack.
So again, keeping it within 13. Talked about the Storm Friends. So we've got our block of 6. You've said that they're the ones that are going to get the Warpstone Spark. We want to put more war power on them. We've got the combination of the Wind Launcher, the Rattling Gun, a Cannon, and the Doomflayer Gauntlets. And anything you want to call out with them?
Yeah, I mean, they're meat. They're 38 wounds with a 4-up save, and you have to take, I think it's 21 wounds before you lose even a tiny fraction of their shooting power. Wow. Like, what other unit is like that? And fairly small footprint. 6, I think they're 50 mils. That's not bad. And it fits in a Soul Scream Bridge. I mean, obviously the price is pretty high, but like I said, you can lose 200 plus points of that without losing a single drop of efficacy. The wind launchers are great. Long range, they don't have to have a line of sight. So if you're hiding in trees or whatever else, they're going to find you. And their damage is a little bit extra, to the point where they can help push through some of the problematic things that you'll see out there. Like the biggest thing the biggest enemy of Skryre is Coalesced Seraphon, because your the whole thing about Skryre is +1 damage. The whole thing about Coalesced is -1 damage, right? So, and they have a bunch of other cool stuff. So they take away your one thing, and then you're left with, nothing. So it goes, it halves your damage for all this stuff, usually.
I really want to pick apart your weapon combination, because when I look at the Stormfiend War Scroll, it is chunky. It has, and if I'm a new player and I've just bought my box of Stormfiends and I'm looking at this and it says 1/3 of the models can have option or option, and then 1/3 of the models can have option or option, and then 1/3 of the models have option. Like, how do I know what I'm choosing? So talk to me. All right, so let's start with the option. So you've got the Warpfire Projector or the Wind Launcher. Why did you go Wind Launcher over the Warpfire Projector?
I mean, the easy answer is that it's got a range that's higher than 9 inches, which is what kind of all the teleports in the army speak to. Wind launchers are also excellent. I think they're 24, 26-inch range.
24.
And so they hit things hard. They hit things from a distance. If you've got those rerolls, you don't care that it's a 4 up to hit, 3 up to wound, or I think that's what it is.
4s and 4s.
Yeah, and I think you get a bonus if you're shooting against a larger unit.
Yeah, the Ren 3 is awesome.
Yeah.
But in saying that, if you're playing in a meta that's like heavy with Nighthaunt, then your Ren does nothing. But I think you've made a really good point. I remember when I very first got introduced to Storm Fiends, which is the joke about Storm Friends, everyone kitted them out with the Warpfire projectors because you could teleport within 3 inches of an enemy and just burn. So you could mitigate that 8 inches by being within range. But if you're using a Soul Screen Bridge, we now know that you can't be in an opponent's territory. You can't be within range of an opponent outside of 9. You've got to be always outside of 9. So if you do teleport with them, unless you have some sneaky ability to move forward somehow,
right,
you're going to be out of range of shooting.
And this army is not fast, so it has to have something to get at the fiddly bits of the opponent. And that's where the wind launchers come in, is they can hit that Slan Mage Priest, they can hit that whatever. They can hit anywhere on the board turn 1 if you get your bridge off.
Talk to me about the other option. So you've got yourself the Grinder Fist Rattling. So you got the Grinder Fist or the Rattling Cannon. So the Grinder Fist is what allows you to tunnel. Is that correct? It allows you to teleport and come up from the board.
It also has a surprisingly good combat profile, like of all of the different ones.
Desmond saying he missed those days of Storm friends tunneling and doing double battalion. No, I don't.
Well, in the Warp Fire Thrower used to do like 2d3 mortal wounds, which was just sick. Now it's like however many models within 8 inches, 4 up mortal wounds. So it's lost a lot of its efficacy, because if they're that close, then you've done something kind of wrong.
I told you I'm scarred. But why the rattling guns, not the Grinder Fist?
So the rattling guns, again, they're a shooting weapon that's greater than 9-inch range, and they're also just terrifically good. A lot of Skryre stuff depends on a few dice rolls going well. This one just throws full weight of fire, so it's another point of diversification. Wind launchers, high rend, few shots, long range. Rattling cannons, low rend, so those Nighthaunt armies are going to have to look out, and a bucket of damage. So it's like, okay, you always have the right tool in your toolbox to handle the right thing. You're never going to get caught out by something.
And I guess you're using the Warpstone Spark in the shooting phase. So by taking the Grinder Fist is a melee weapon, so it's not going to get that shooting attack. So you're relying more on combat damage, and you're not taking advantage of that Warpstone Spark as much. So, and I think adding the +1 damage to the Rattling Cannon, and doing up to 3d6 attacks, you throw down a command point to reroll 1s to hit, or
you don't have to get more warp power.
Of course.
Roll everything.
Even if you don't get more warp power off, like let's say hypothetically you play against a Lord Croak, for example, or some type of magic dom, you've still got the ability to reroll 1s to hit. If you get more warp power off, you're rerolling, like that's a lot of hits.
Well, you also have the Vigor Dust Injector, which you can hit these guys with from the Arch-Warlock, which is just straight up +1 to hit.
You've also got your third option, which is either the Doomflayer Gauntlets or the Shock Gauntlets. Why the Doomflayer?
At this point, you could flip a coin and go either way. Doomflayer Gauntlets do a little bit better on the charge, so if you're taking the initiative in the game, it gives you that extra bit of high-rend close combat damage, which you wouldn't get anywhere else. But really, I think either one would be fine. These are the guys that you're slugging wounds onto as you march up the field anyway. So if they do get to fight in combat, it's only a plus, and they're almost the same as far as total efficacy.
Yeah, no, I dig it. The only thing I will say, though, is be really careful of your Storm Fiends. There's been plenty of times where I have battle shocked 1 or 2 off the table from a block of 6 or a block of 9. And when you lose 6 wounds a model from battle shock, And I've often done it when they've tunneled them from a Gnawhole, as opposed to I haven't played a list like yours, like that without a support hero or without a command point. That is a super expensive battle shock.
Yep, that's the only thing you're saving your command points for in this whole army is for the Storm Fiends battle shock. Even if they only lose one guy, you don't want to roll at 6.
No. Or even a 7 if you've got like the combat dude, because you don't want to keep all your shooting, right? Like, just don't lose it.
Yeah, tough thing too. I was going to say the tough thing too is you get chip damage on your own turn. So even if you don't, get engaged in combat with them, sometimes you lose one on your own turn, and then you have to use your, take a test then as well.
Anything else about the Storm Fiends? I mean, they maybe the last question I've got for you is why 6, not 9? Why not 2 lots of 3? Why 6?
6 for the Vigor Dust Injector and more warp power. The bigger the unit is, the more meat shield you have. And then the reason why it's not 9, I would love 9, but there was an errata that came out that said you can't do that. It's too powerful. Because when you have 9, you have an extra meat shield. You have 3 wind launchers, so you've got it's just like a disgusting amount of combat damage. So to scale that back, they said only 6.
So then why not 6 and 3?
3's just not enough.
Like to take an extra 3, not have like a block of 3 and then a block of 6.
3 is just not enough to attach all of those buffs to it and really get a lot out of.
No, I just want to again ask the question. We've talked about the powerfulness of good English there. We talked about the power output of the Stormfiends. I guess the question is, why not more? And I think we then go into Skryre Acolytes. So, Skryre Acolytes. So look at this War Scroll. You're going to get yourself. It can run and shoot, which I think is an awesome little ability, especially if you're going to play like a block of 20 and put them on the table. They can run and shoot, which kind of gets around the fact that they've only got an 8-inch attack. So it's not a very long range attack, but you do get to add +1 to hit if you have a unit of 10 or more models. So you've sacrificed a lot. You've sacrificed not taking the +1 to hit because you're taking blocks of 5.
Well, the +1 is the enemies if you're targeting an enemy unit of 10 or more.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I should probably read the whole sentence. So yes, add 1 to hit rolls for attacks made by the poison wind globes if the target unit has 10 or more. Okay, so you get +1 anyway.
Mm-hmm. Which some armies, you'll never face that. And some armies, you'll just melt whatever's in front of you.
So talk to me about why the build that you built. Why the 5s? Why not Jezzail's? Why not blocks of 20? Talk to me a little bit about the decision making here of the 6 units of 5.
Yeah, so I've got some Jezzail's in the list, and I went back and forth between having a block of 20 and I think 1 or 2 or 3 blocks of 5 Acolytes. But really, you already have a ton of damage potential in the army. You're not lacking for that in any way, shape, or form. So then your question is, do I need more board presence? The answer is absolutely yes. So you're giving up a little bit more of what you already have a ton of to get a little bit of what you have none of. And so you just park these guys random places. You sit them back on a Gnawhole. You sit them on an objective. You have multiple redundant layers of ablative armor for your guys that they have to just, a Terrorgeist will kill 5 of these guys just like it'll kill 20. So, and then the other thing is getting 20 of them into a position where they all are in range of an effective unit is very difficult as well.
And that's the challenge with the 8-inch attack. They've got so much output, but you've probably only got one good shot. So by not taking the block of 20 and taking blocks of 5, you're taking up more board presence. You're not having to back them up with a meat shield of clan rats that allows you to take advantage of your Gnawholes teleporting around or going for objectives. They're not going to take a hit. They've got a 6-up armor save. They've got 1 wound. They do move 6, and the ability to run and shoot is a nice little ability. And as you said, the +1 and the Warpstone Spark probably also comes into play potentially as well, especially if you are going to Soul Scream Bridge, have 2 units of the 5 plus plus the Storm Friends being the third.
Yeah, and they can't shoot because they're 8-inch range for the Soul Screen Bridge.
Yeah,
But later on, you just pick one of them, and yeah, maybe they got lucky and they put an extra 3 wounds on something.
I wish Salamanders were 8 inches. Like, feels cheaty that they can do that and you can't.
Right. Yeah. So Acolytes also, them being on 32 mil bases, it makes it difficult for them to all get in range. The other thing with this that Skaven often face is with these short range things like Storm Fiends or even Jezzails or other things, sometimes the units just get in the way of each other. So when you have smaller, like nimble units like Acolytes, you can just shove them out of the way a lot easier than you could a unit of 40 clan rats. So just another thing to consider.
Before I move into your artillery, I want to ask why no Doom Wheels? I have not seen a Doom Wheel since Warhammer Fantasy Battles.
Doom Wheels are good.
Why not?
Doom Wheels are good. They're fast. In this army, like the build that I have here is very much take the middle of the board with force, blow things up, and then move out from there with what's left. A Doom Wheel is a subtle nuance piece that gets you edge cases, works around the edges of things, sneaks in places, can be a disrupting force. So it just doesn't necessarily fit the theme, but it was in the list at various iterations, and I said, yeah, this is a good thing. It can also, it's got a greater than 9-inch range weapon, so it can go through the Soul Screen Bridge and zap something. But and they're fun.
I'm seeing a lot of people like just telling me how amazing how much fun Doom Wheels are, but why aren't people taking them? Like, what does it need to be? Is it because it's so random that you don't see it competitively, but you see it, in the casual garage games? Or is there something inherently within the Doom Wheel that means that you're just choosing something else, or it's just like you can't take it? Like what's your thoughts?
For me, what stands out is the 8 wounds. It's just 150 points for 8 wounds. The shooting attack is fine. Combat is not great. You would take it for the movement. And if you're taking it for the movement in a mixed Skaven list, there's other things that do that. There's gutter runners that are a little bit speedier, things like that. But I like it. I love it. But it is a little too random. 46 move could be 4, right?
So you got your Jezzails. So you've got your unit of Jezzails. Yep. So how many is that? Is that just one unit? Like, how many units is that?
It's 1 unit of 6.
Okay, cool. I couldn't tell. Like, usually there's like a number. I'm like, wait, hold up.
Yeah.
So you got your Jezzails. They're your long range. You got your 30-inch attack. They're hitting on 4s, wounding on 3s. Rend 2 for 2 damage. Put the spark down. They're 3 damage apiece. If the unmodified hit roll for a Jezzail is a 6, it does 2 mortal wounds, but then the attack sequence stops. And if you re-roll hit rolls for the Jezzails, if they haven't moved, so is that a good candidate for like your what's it called, the Gnawhole?
Yeah, because they don't count as moving. It's a setup or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
So
that's not a move, guys. That's not a move. So if you move something, so a move is a traditional move. If you use the Soul Screen Bridge or your Gnawholes, that's a setup. Because it's not a move, it means that you would get to re-roll those hits should you do that. So a good little tidbit.
Yeah, and so the reason why there's a command trait that allows you to pick in Skryre that allows you to pick a unit and re-roll their hit rolls, which is awesome. But you don't necessarily need that because the only 2 units that are rolling to hit are your Storm Fiends, which will be getting more and more war power, and your Jezzails already get that reroll. So that's why you're able to afford Verminous Valor as a protection item instead of something that causes more damage. So these go through, and it's just another way to diversify your damage. It's longer range than anything else. It puts in mortal wounds, which we actually haven't seen yet in our list. We've got a ton of damage in the Storm Fiends and some magic stuff, but this is the first mortal wound damage that's available.
One of the cool things that I think with the Warp Block Jezzails as well is because you can re-roll your attacks, they are great for sniping out heroes. So if you want to go for a hero that's like Lookout Sir, you can afford the -1 to hit penalty because you're re-rolling not just once, but you can re-roll everything. Obviously, re-rolls happen before you have modifiers, so there's going to be 1 dice roll that you can't re-roll. But other than that, you can probably mitigate a lot of that Lookout Sir defense because you're re-rolling all your attacks.
Yep, and sometimes you're fishing for 6s for that, even though if you have the Warpstone Spark, actually, if you get an attack fully through, it's 3 damage instead of 2 from the mortal wounds.
Correct. That's what I was literally about to call that. Is that sometimes the rules will say you can re-roll fails. This doesn't say that. That says you can re-roll hits. So even if there is a -1 penalty that is technically a fail, you can still re-roll that. Or you could re-roll all of your successes and fish for those 6s.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about like a strategy, like you really need to kill that that 5 wound wizard or that 6 wound support character, you could just re-roll everything that wasn't a 6, and hopefully you get a couple of 6s, and you could probably pop that hero with the 2 mortal wounds per 6. So all you need is 3. See you later.
So Jezzail's, that's what most people gravitate towards. They're like, oh, sniper, I'm going to snipe that one guy out of the middle of that stuff. But what I use them for is cleanup crew. So the Storm Fiends have very specific targets that they go to. The Rattling Cannons hit whatever is in close range, and they're just going to annihilate it. The Poison Wind Mortars will hit a ton of stuff and hurt it pretty bad. And then what's left? Jezzail's can reach out and touch any of that stuff and finish off that last thing here or there that they or the Warp Lightning Cannons weren't able to finish off. And they are so, with the rerolls to hit and the 3s to wound and the -2 rend, they're actually one of the more kind of predictable amount of damage that you're going to get in the army. So you wouldn't want to finish things off with a Warp Lightning Cannon. So you fire all your big high risk, high reward stuff, and then you bring in, the closers to actually do the really predictable amount of damage.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I was gonna mention before we move into the Warp Lightning Cannon, but sometimes with your Storm Fiends, should you charge into combat, they might still be tied up by 1 or 2 models that were Inspiring Presence that are tied up your Storm Fiends, and you want to get them out. And you don't want to waste your shooting attacks on 2 or 3 models tying them up. So the Jezzails could pop them, get them out, unlock them, and then use the Storm Fiends to then go in and do mass damage, especially with something like the Rattling Cannon, into other units that would just be wasted if they're just tied up in combat. So that's a really good shout as well, not just for taking out heroes, but also it's unlocking some of those core troops that you just want to keep moving, like the Storm Fiends.
Yeah, and you can also unlock with the Soul Screen Bridge or the Gnawhole, so you can pull them out, send them up somewhere else, and shoot away.
Speaking of shooting away, you've also got the Warp Lightning Cannon. Talk to me about the Warp Lightning Cannon. I haven't seen one of these since I played Dan, not Dan Brewer, but Danger Mouse Dan on Warhammer TV stream. He shot me twice with his Warp Lightning Cannons. He was a jerk. I won, but he's still a jerk. But talk to me about the Warp Lightning Cannons, because I always remember them as long-range threats that were a bit dicey. I remember them being a bit unpredictable. Yeah,
they are unpredictable. That's why I would never take just one. That's why I feel like I need to take 2 to really actually get some predictability out of them turn 1. That's what each of the other engineers is for, is they each pick a Warp Lightning Cannon, buff it up so you do double damage from their from what is essentially, it's a strange mechanic, but you get D6 mortal wounds from each Warp Lightning Cannon.
So if the Warlock engineer is within 3 inches of the Warp Lightning Cannon, it will increase its power output. So it does make it a bit more consistent. So I guess the engineer is tag teaming with the Lightning Cannon.
Mm-hmm. And so it'll do essentially D6 times 2 mortal wounds for each Warp Lightning Cannon.
And it's range 24. There's no sequence, so there's no hit roll, there's no wound roll, there's no damage roll. It's just it's an ability. So it's not an ability, but it doesn't have a hit wound, so you don't have to worry about more warp power. You don't have to re-roll stuff. It's just
happens.
Yeah. So your sparks are safe for your acolytes and your Storm Fiends.
Yep. And so between this and the Jezzails, these are hard counters to Bastiladons. Bastiladons are the one thing that if you look at anything else in this army, you can throw Storm Fiends at them all day long. You're not going to get much through on them, especially if they're coalesced. But you turn a few Warp Lightning Cans at them and they just disappear.
That's a good call. That's a very good call. Those Bastiladons, or even Croak, pew pew.
Yeah. It gets around lookout, sir, which is helpful too. Or any debuffs to shoot.
That's what, that's where I use my Hurricanum, right? The Hurricanum has a very similar ability. It just does mortal wounds from afar. They don't have to worry about the hit and wound roll. So again, great for character sniping, great for getting those things that are at the back of the board and it's really hard to hit. I like it. And 24 is quite generous too.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think the key is I think 2 is the right balance. I wouldn't go any more than 2.
Right.
Going 3 because I think because you're essentially paying 180 for the warp lightning cannon plus to get that consistency. So you're looking at a 300 point combination, and more points that you're putting into that, you're taking away from bodies, and I think that's is what you really need.
Yeah, and later on in the game, I mean, they're another unit that the opponent has to try to get to and shoot. So if they're blowing those up, then your Acolytes or Jezzails or Storm Fiends are running around doing the other stuff.
Yeah. It's only got 8 wounds. It's a 4-up armor save. So when it gets hit, but the cool thing as well is it doesn't degrade. So
right.
if I do 7 damage and it's only got 1 wound left, it's not like I roll less dice. It's still the same output. So that's quite handy. Is there anything else that you'd want to talk about this list? We've talked almost for 40 minutes on this one list, but we've been very thorough, and I think that'll carry over nicely and to make the second list quite a rapid discussion. But is there any other final comments that you'd make on this particular list?
I'd say the key thing that I think about with Skaven in particular is you are never going to get to choose first turn. So you have to make the choice of first turn as hard as possible of a choice to your opponent. And that's where the Soul Screen Bridge comes in. That's where the long range stuff comes in, is you have to make it such a hard choice for them that they're not really sure that they made the right decision. Because the next best thing to making the decision yourself is making it hard on your opponent.
And while I move into the second list, what is the ideal state for you? Do you like to go first or do you like to go second?
Good question. I mean, going second, I think is, if I had to pick one right off the cuff. But again, I'm happy. The ideal state is to be happy being given either.
Damned if you do, damned if you don't. You give me first turn, I'm going to use my Soul Screen Bridge to throw my dudes up the board. Damned if you don't, you're going to be in range for more shooting, and it's going to be easier for me to shoot you off the table. So
yeah. If your opponent's already rubbing their head in frustration halfway through deployment, then you're in a pretty good spot.
Yeah. I think the key though is to get the jump on this type of list. If it was me, I would want to get the jump on this list ASAP. Take out those heroes, reduce the output. Go for those Storm Fiends. Whatever it might be. Take. You're going to get shot, but by taking a board presence, you don't have enough bodies to kind of take them off me. So you're forced to kill me.
Yep.
The second list we've got here, and this will probably be a lot quicker. You've got your Skaven Tide. So it's a heavy Skryre, but it's not necessarily all in on Skryre. So you've got a lot of commonality here. We've got the Warlock Bombardier, which is the general, a little bit different, but the same combination of the. You've got Deranged Inventor, and you've got more war power. We've also got the Arch-Warlock with the Vigor Dust Injector with more warp power. We've also got a Grey Seer on Screaming Bell with Skitter Leap. You got yourself 20 Clan Rats, 10 Storm Vermin, 6 Storm Fiends, 6 Storm Fiends with the Soul Screen Bridge. So you've stripped out the Jezzails, you've stripped out the Acolytes, you've doubled down on the Storm Fiends, and you've got some additional bodies. You've got 2 units of Clan Rats as well as a Storm Vermin. And a little bit of a different combination. The Grey Seer on Screaming Bell, I had Rohit talking to us not long ago about just how good that is, and having Lookout Sir. Talk to me about some of the differences and how this list is different to the one we just spoke about.
Yeah, so it's all an engine for those 2 big Storm Fiend blocks, and that's why you see Deranged Inventor, which allows for rerolls to hit on 1 Skryre unit, within 13 or whatever. So that combined with Vigor Dust Injector and more war power, you can use those interchangeably to either put a ton of really good stuff onto 1 unit who's in the right place at the right time, or put it on both of the units and have them just hit across the field. So a lot of this list is just being able to squeeze those buffs into the exact spot that they need to be at the right time. And it also gives you double the meat shield, so they have to fight through potentially 42 4-up save wounds on your Storm Fiends before they even start degrading, in the best case scenario.
Yeah, those I've fought through big blocks of Storm Fiends, and it takes a lot of power. It takes a lot of focus. And if I'm focusing on the Storm Fiends, it means I'm not focusing on the Clan Rats who are going for the objectives.
Mm-hmm.
If I focus on the Clan Rats and I don't go on the Storm Fiends, then
you're dead.
I'm ignoring, like the output as we've just talked about with the Vigor Dust and more Warp Power and the Warpstone Sparks. All of a sudden, they just become this absolute brutal, self-contained block of bodies. So, what does Deranged Inventor do?
So that's that. Pick a unit, reroll it. They can reroll their hits for shooting. So you put that on whatever unit doesn't have more warp power, or if you fail to cast more warp power, it's a redundancy.
Nice. You've either got a backup plan or you've got especially like with in the age of supercasters. I think getting off spells in the age of Nagash and Teclis and Croak, we need to become less reliant on spells. I'm getting the feeling like as the meta kind of shifts, so having an ability that allows you to do the same type of thing is just perfect.
Yeah, and if you can backboard your caster for more warp power and stay out of their unbind range, then you can cast 4 poison wind mortars at them during the shooting phase against their supercaster, and then go from there.
Talk to me about Skitterleap. So I mentioned very early on that I really like the spell. We haven't really spoken about it yet. So it's a casting value of 6. It's only for Grey Seers, which is why it wasn't in the last list. So it's Grey Seer specific. And what it allows you to do on a casting value of 6 is you get to pick one friendly Skaven-type hero with a wound characteristic of 12 or less. And that's within 13 inches of the caster. You remove them, and it's a teleport anywhere on the battlefield as long as it's outside of 9 inches from an enemy unit. That obviously counts as their movement. So,
so you almost never cast it. I'll say that right away. But it is that teleport anywhere to take an objective, which means nobody can ever really truly leave an objective until they've killed a bunch of your stuff that isn't causing the damage, right? If you're killing my Grey Seer or both my Warlocks, the Warlocks are more problematic, but you're not killing the big stuff that's actually punching you in the face. But it is there because you can do some power projection. In this case, you can shove a unit of 6 Storm Fiends through a Gnawhole and then Skitterleap Warlock onto them to let them then take the buffs in the shooting phase. And potentially get command abilities or whatever else.
Yeah, I like that because it still allows you to, because I think that's one of the challenges, right? You take your Storm Fiends through the Gnawhole or any 20 Acolytes, Jezzails, Clan Rats, whatever it's hard to get those supporting heroes around the table. And as we mentioned earlier, Battle Shock can be brutal to you guys. Some of the command abilities are important to be able to apply. Skitterleap just allows you to continue moving up with the support hero to that key unit.
Yeah, and it's also your get out of jail free card if you get stuck somewhere or it's like, oh no, I'm outside, I'm 14 inches outside of my bubble for casting this thing. It's like, oh, just scoot them over a little bit.
Can the Grey Seer teleport itself?
No,
so it has to be somebody else.
Yep.
I'm just looking. The Vermin Lords are all under 12 wounds or less, right? So you can you could teleport. I know your list doesn't have a Vermin Lord, but if you wanted to teleport a Vermin Lord, that's possible. If you wanted to teleport, an Arch-Warlock Bombardier.
Pretty much everything but him and the other big Plague Furnace.
I love it. The Verminlord Corruptor is exactly 12 wounds. I love it. Not a wound more.
Right. Yep. Italy, it's a utility piece, but it almost never applies.
So we've talked about the Storm Fiends, so I'm not going to touch them again. You've obviously got 2 versions of them, so with the same kind of kit out, so just double the fun. What do the Clan Rats and the Storm Vermin bring into the table?
It's just bodies. I mean, like you said before, they're bodies that are highly maneuverable because they, run an extra 2 inches with their bell ringers, and they can retreat and charge with their standard bearers. I think that's the right the right way around. And they're just bodies. So you set up with, them in the front with your Screaming Bell, giving them all Battle Shock immunity. And if your opponent takes first turn, great. They hit some of those and maybe they get into your bell and everything just kind of gets gummed up and then you blow it all off the board. Otherwise, later on in the game, there's 5 Clan Rats here, 2 Stormvermin there, and they're holding down whatever they need to hold down.
What about this? What about the Storm Vermin?
They were a handicap imposed by the Soul Scream Bridge, increasing from 80 to 100 points. I would love to have 3 units of 20 Clan Rats, but I just couldn't find any other space to keep the Soul Scream Bridge and the character package and everything else in place. So
So you've got them there for cheap bodies, but in the ideal world, should any points adjust, you would quickly replace them to be another block of Clan Rats.
Yeah, at this point, I'm at a pretty uncomfortable spot of how many bodies I have with this list, but I think it'll still manage. The other thing is sending 10 Stormvermin through a Gnawhole is a force to be reckoned with. Like, they're not nothing, and people have to respect that, especially with the little units that they usually guard Gnawholes with.
Yeah, they're a much smaller footprint on the table. I'm just trying to bring up their war scroll. I'm trying to find out where it is on my book, but I think I think it'd be easy to underestimate the Storm Vermin while I focus on the Clan Rats or the Storm Fiends or the support heroes. But they will cap an objective. They will. They've got a small footprint, so they can steal and just generally be annoying.
Yep, they'll take on whatever other equivalent unit of 10 scrubs are around.
I like it. What is it? The Soul Scream Bridge. Is there any other? I mean, you're gone.
Just the thing is, like, with the Storm Fiends, like, let's say you've heroically finished the last of this big unit of 6 Storm Fiends that had all the buffs. Then the next unit of 6 Storm Fiends steps up and they take all the buffs that unit had as well. So you're just like, ugh, and then you just have to fight through that as well.
Yeah, it allows you really to take, some strong board presence, because I think that's one thing is in your first list, when you've only got 1 block of the Storm Fiends, where you want to counter. I'm like, right, I need to handle this. But when I have 2 blocks and they're kind of going from either side or they're both in the middle, that's a lot of focus and a lot of damage. And potentially some armies just don't have the tools to be able to handle such a big block while still trying to handle Clan Rats, still trying to handle some of the other things that are in the list, and all the while trying to screen the teleporting shenanigans of Skitterleap, the Gnawhole, having a unit of Storm Fiends that could tunnel if you wanted to put the Grinder Fist in. Like, there's just so much movement and shenanigans, like trying to all while hold an objective.
Yeah, the biggest counter to this list, though, is any sort of coalesced list, because it takes all of your damage potential of your Storm Fiends down a big notch. So you got to kind of play around that.
What have you learnt by playing these types of lists compared to other Skaven lists, or what have you learnt that you thought was going to be good and isn't quite good, or things that really surprised you? Because you've got some very non-traditional builds. As I mentioned, the very first thing I thought is you'd have a big block of Acolytes. I would have imagined maybe 2 blocks of Jezzails.
Yeah, you kind of have to fight against some of the benefits that people put forward for Skaven, where it's like lots of bodies. I want to have lots of bodies. You kind of mentioned that before. That's not really the case for Skaven. You want to keep your bodies alive that you have. You've got good battle shock immunity options, and just leaning into what breaks the rules. So, like, +1 damage on all your shooting and reroll hits and wounds for that. That's a pretty rare thing. Having elite Skaven infantry, not a rare thing. Everybody's got elite infantry, but you're the only one that has Storm Fiends, so use them.
I think the interesting thing, if you are a new Skaven player, guys, I would highly recommend you go and research your FAQs and erratas, because there's a lot of things. Maybe one of the disappointments that I have with this book is that there is so much errata and FAQ, and there's some things like you look at the Warp Lightning Vortex Endless spell. If I was picking this book up for the first time, I would be so excited. But then I'm like, oh, it's changed, and probably why you don't even have it. You should have one of your own endless spells. Is there any of your endless spells that you would maybe consider if you had some points adjustments?
I mean, yeah, the Warp Lightning Vortex is fine, especially when paired with Skitter Leap, and an Arch-Warlock, and it's given me some benefit in the past. So yeah, I would take that. I don't really rate the Bell of Doom, or the Vermintide either, though.
Why don't you rate them? Anything in particular?
The Bell of Doom, I mean, its key thing is Battle Shock immunity, and if you're paying points for that, the Grace here on Screaming Bell is already pretty criminally undercosted and has a ton of other like blow-by benefits. And the Vermintide's just another kind of, short-ranged moving damage thing, and its shtick is that you can move over it, but your troops aren't fast enough to move over it anyways. So yeah.
Yeah, no, like if I'm a Skaven player looking at these options going, wait a second, you didn't even talk about my 3 endless spells. Mm-hmm. I think it's still good use of the Warp Lightning Vortex, but it's just not as generous as it used to be. I think the combination, as you mentioned, Skitter Leap is a great combination, but you're really putting out your wizard to get it out there. So
right.
Good luck. If you don't have a plan to back up your wizard, it's probably going to get hit because you're going to be so close.
Well, but it's also one of those things where it's like he would be crazy to do that, but if he does do that, am I in a really bad place? And then you're like, oh no, he can do that. What do I do? And it's like, well, I was never going to do that, but now you're on the back foot.
But I can. Yeah, it's a shame that KO can use your endless spell better than you can.
It
like we won't go there. We won't go there. Any other things that you've learned? Any other advice? Any pearls of wisdom from your crazy crack science laboratory?
Just lean into their strengths. Do a ton of damage. Don't try to soak or go toe to toe with your opponent. Just take all their fancy rules and blow them off the back of the board, and then scrape away whatever's left.
Yeah, and like Tom's mentioning in the chat that Vermintide can be a nice blocker. There are different ways. I think the challenge is that your lists have been so tight with points that you don't have the points to adjust as well. And if you are going to put in something like the Warp Lightning Vortex, or you're going to put in your Bell or the Vermintide, what are you giving up to get it in the list? And when I look at this type of list, there's not a lot of fat. You don't have a lot of fat to be playing around with. Yeah, you could bundle up your acolytes into another unit, but it doesn't make them any cheaper. So,
well, and that's the question. You can block Archaon or you can kill Archaon. I'd rather kill him, right?
Yeah, I would too. Or if I'm a Gargant, I just stand there and just keep scoring objectives. Adam, this has been awesome. Oh, I was about to wrap this up, but I've got a cracking question from Victoria. So Victoria's asked the last question, and we'll bring this home. And that is, what is your opinions on the Warp Fire Thrower?
I love them. There's one of my favorite rules. When I take Thankful, I take him with 4 Warp Fire Throwers. But as units, when opponents have kind of chip mortal wounds, they evaporate too easily if they're those small units. But I've been known to slip one in. They keep hordes honest, and so yeah, I like them.
Yeah, I haven't seen them for a while, but I remember them being annoying.
Yeah.
More of my experiences against Dan Brewer, so I'm like, you're a jerk. Stop your crazy list teching with Balewind Vortexes and Skitter Leaping and stop it. Just play an honest game. Walk up the table.
Well, and with Thankful, with Warp Fire Throwers, if you put 4 Warp Fire Throwers on it, talk about breaking the game. You don't have to roll to hit. You don't have to roll a wound. You just throw a bucket of mortal wounds at them. You look at Mortec Guard or Ghouls or any sort of horde, and it doesn't matter if it's 2 wounds. It doesn't matter if it's a 2-up save. It's gone.
Yeah. No, I dig it. I like Skaven. They've got a lot of versatility. They got a little bit hit hard with the nerfs. I got attacked in my Daughters of Cain little preview. I happened to put Skaven as a C tier, and people were like, they raged at me. They're like, oh, why'd you rate that? And I said, look, I like Skaven. It's just that there's only certain builds that I think are very successful competitively. And I think, like Pestilence got hit quite hard. There's some nice builds in Master Clan. There's some nice builds with Skryre. But overall, as a book, I think the book is quite weak. But there's some really strong builds in there. So it just...
Yeah, I'm more than happy. As much as people want to downplay Skaven, I love that. I love it when they don't show up on the podiums. I love it when people don't think about them or plan for them, because when they do show up, they come out of the shadows, they bite you in the back, and that's where they operate the best.
and they're a niche army, you've got to think a little bit differently to play Skaven. I think that's the key as well. It's not as obvious as Lords of Cain, OBR. There are some things you just push forward and win, and that was kind of why I rated them a little bit harder than people expected. But Adam, this has been awesome. I've got to go to work. You probably have to continue work. I do have your Twitter handle below. If you want to see one of the best display boards, like this guy should be like the face of armies on parade. Did an amazing board, actually. You had a teams board that was Skaven at the bottom and then a top layer of Duarden.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you want to look at like that, like if you want to hear not only just like Adam's got a great hobby kind of channel, but also a great channel, Twitter, go give the man a follow. He's awesome. But is there any shout outs, anything you want to say to kind of bring us home?
Yep. I just appreciate being on your show and talking about Skaven anytime. So yeah, thanks for having me.
No, it was great. It was great to put some love on the vermin. You infiltrate my cities. You eat my cheese. You, my dog chases you. But it was great to talk Skaven, and I think between we've now got some different alternative lists and ideas across the community. And as I mentioned, I'm going to do a pestilence show soon. So let's double down on the rats.
Awesome.
All right, thanks guys. Enjoy the rest of your day. I hope you found that discussion valuable. If you did, give the video the old thumbs up. And if you have a comment or an insight, leave it in the comment section below. The champions over here are my AOS Coach Patreons and YouTube members. So you guys are bloody legends. Thank you for all the support. If you want to know more about the support programs, the links are below down here in the episode description, along with a link to the Discord server, so we can continue this conversation. Until next time, don't forget to name your characters and have a good one.